Hi, I'm Rabbi Jeremy Kreidel from Mahar, and this is Mahar's Hanukkah candle lighting video for the third night of Hanukkah in 2024, right? That Hanukkah that started with Christmas. So I have my menorah here, and remember we talked about putting in the candles this way and then lighting, right? We put the candles in this way and you light them that way, so you're lighting the newest one first. Okay, we've talked about that. We've talked about a little bit of the history of the Hanukkah story itself. Today, I want to talk about Hanukkah and the role of women. And not just because, look, we don't really tell the Hanukkah story and talk about women very much. That's true. But also because we need to account for why Jewish law takes a particular stance about women and Hanukkah. And the stance that Jewish law takes about women and Hanukkah, which is interesting for humanistic Jews to know, but not going to be something that they really bind themselves to. But the thing that's interesting about women and Hanukkah is that Jewish legal codes from the early modern period forward talk about women not working while the Hanukkah candles are lit. So from the point that they're lit until they burn out, the idea is women don't busy themselves with doing the things around the home that traditional Jewish society from the early modern period would have expected women to be engaged in. Okay, so what's going on? What's going on is there are a couple of different stories that are in the background of the Hanukkah story in which women play a crucial role. And so the rabbis sort of know these stories. They're not part of the Tanakh, the Jewish Bible. They're not even necessarily part of early rabbis' texts, but eventually we start to acknowledge these things and see that they're acknowledged and deal with them. And so the two stories are Judith and Holofernes, that's one of the stories, and then the mother and her 7 sons, and that's another story. So let's talk about each of these. Judith and Holofernes is actually sort of a reframed telling of a story that appears in the book of Judges. Judges is in the Tanakh. It's actually the 7th book of the Bible. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, that's the Torah. Then the book of Joshua is the 6th book, and sometimes the Torah plus Joshua is called the Hexateuch. And then the 7th book is Judges. Judges tells a prolonged story of the Israelites trying to conquer the land of Canaan. And in there's a story about a woman who is a woman of ill repute, essentially. And her name is Yael. And Yael kills a Assyrian general. She entices him into her tent. She gives him dairy, makes him thirsty, gives him wine, makes him drunk. He falls asleep. She puts a tent peg through his head. Okay, so now Judith and Holofernes takes that story, brings it forward in time to sometime in the Persian or Greek period. It's not really specific about when that's happening, and there's a reason for that. It's because it's retelling something that's from Judges. And it basically says that the story says that Judith saved Jerusalem at some point in time from Persian or Greek generals at some point in time. And the specific general is Holofernes, and it's the same kind of story. We entice Holofernes in, he's given dairy, he's given wine, he gets drunk, except this time Judith cuts his head off. So that's the story of Judith and Holofernes, and it appears in a book called Judith, which is not part of the Tanakh, the Jewish Bible. It is part of the Catholic Bible. It is part of the Orthodox Bible. It is in the Apocrypha section. If you are looking at a Protestant Bible that happens to have the Apocrypha, and many don't. And so we have this story in the book of Judith about Judith and Holofernes. Okay, so that's one of them. The rabbis know this story. The other story is about Hannah and her 7 sons. This is told a little bit in the book of 2nd Maccabees and in detail in the book of 4th Maccabees. Again, books that are not in the Tanakh, they're not in the Jewish Bible, but they are in the Orthodox Bible. These are all books that we only have in Greek or other languages. We don't have them in Hebrew, and that makes it real hard to get a book into the Tanakh, period. So these books are in Greek. 2nd and 4th Maccabees tell the same story. It's just that 4th Maccabees go real deep into it. And the basic story is Hannah, this woman, has 7 sons. And they are swept up into this persecution by Antiochus Epiphanes' forces. And they are going to be made to engage in practices that are against Jewish law, and her sons refuse. And Hannah refuses. And so each of her sons, one after the other, systematically is killed by Greek forces. And as this is happening, Hannah is shouting encouragement to her sons. So the entire family, including Hannah eventually, become martyrs. And it's Hannah kind of encouraging them along that is another part of this thing that the rabbis put together about women having a particular role in the Hanukkah story, and therefore having a particular role in the home on Hanukkah when the candles are lit. So we have these two stories. Again, they're not in the Torah, they're not in the Tanakh, the broader Jewish Bible. We do have stories, we have summaries of these things in Hebrew in other books. Eventually, these books are translated into Hebrew, but it's much later on, which is ironic because maybe you're translating them back into Hebrew. That's kind of a funny thing too. And so these are the two stories that really kind of give us a women have a special role in Hanukkah thing that happens in Jewish law. And again, this is Jewish law creating an exception. It's not Jewish law centering women's voices, and it's not Jewish law centering women's dignity. It's this other thing of, here's a time when women did these very specific things, and so they get some recognition because of they went above and beyond. That's where it's coming out of. It's not coming out of a feminist mindset. So it's useful to know, here we are with this kind of complicated backstory to women's involvement in the Hanukkah story, and then women's involvement during the Hanukkah holiday itself, at least as traditional Jewish law understands it. So, having told that story, it's the third night of Hanukkah. We're going to go ahead and light our candles. You're going to have to take it on faith. Hard for humanists, I know, but we're going to try it. You're going to have to take it on faith that I put these candles in 1, 2, 3, right? That's the newest one right there. You'll have to take that part on faith, but I'm going to light them left to right, the way I mentioned in a prior video. We do kind of traditionally to reflect this idea that we don't decrease holiness, we only increase holiness, even though holiness is a whole other thing in humanistic Judaism. I know. We're going to just go with it's custom anyway, so let's do the custom. Matches. Tonight we only have the one blessing. It's the third night of Hanukkah. We don't do the traditional She'asa Nisim La'avotenu, who perform miracles for our ancestors' blessing, so we just have our candle blessing. And tonight also happens to be Shabbat. I do not have Shabbat candles over here. If you want to have Shabbat candles, you can do that yourself. And we're going to go ahead and light the menorah, and we'll say a blessing that includes Shabbat in it so that we've got our bases covered. Okay, and we say, Nivarech et ha'or ba'olam, Nivarech et ha'or ba'adam, Nivarech et ha'or shel Shabbat v'Hanukkah. Let us bless the light in the world. Let us bless the light in humanity. Let us bless the light of Shabbat and of Hanukkah. So with that, Chag Sameach, Happy Hanukkah, and Shabbat Shalom. I'll see you tomorrow with quick Havdalah, because we do Havdalah before we light the menorah, so we got to do a quick Havdalah before we get to that. So we'll have a little Havdalah, we'll have a little bit of lighting the menorah. I'm going to leave it to you to decide whether you want to light Shabbat candles on your end of things. I'll be doing that a little bit later tonight. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach.